All right, so we've got some more folks jumping in, so I'll give everybody a minute and then we'll get started. But the topic tonight is what you can do if you have a bad C&P exam. So we're going to go over, what is an example of a bad C&P exam, what you can do after the fact or immediately after the fact. But sometimes we don't know, if we had a bad C&P exam until we get our decision letter. So we'll talk about both options, or both situations, and then what your options are, because there's always a way to fight it. Always a way to fight it. So don't take it laying down. We'll make some noise if we need to if you had a bad experience, especially if you're denied or underrated because of that bad C&P exam. But just to start off, and examples of what exactly a bad C&P exam is. So if you come out of your appointment and it went terribly, they cut you off, they didn't let you finish saying what you needed to say. If it was a physical C&P exam and they didn't use the tool to measure your range of motion, if they were just kind of eyeballing it, these are all examples of a bad C&P exam, because there are protocols that they're supposed to follow. And if they don't give you your allotted time, they don't let you explain your answers, they keep cutting you off, odds are they're just trying to filter you through and get you out without really hearing what you've got to say. And we don't take that lightly. We want you to have all the time and attention that your case deserves. So what you can do immediately, what we want you to do, of course, is tell your coach. Once you've had that C&P exam, if it went like crap, let your coach know. Say, hey, my exam went bad. I didn't get the allotted time. It lasted 10 minutes, or they cut me off, or they called me a name, or whatever the case is. I've heard it all. You'd be surprised. So we want to know about it, and then we'll give you direction on what to do next. But the best thing that you can do in those situations is immediately call the White House hotline and complain and say, hey, I had unfair or unjust treatment in my C&P exam, so that it's on the record as soon as you've had that appointment that it didn't go well. Because if you know immediately, you don't want to wait until you get the denial letter or get underrated to make that noise. You want it to be known as soon as possible. So I'm going to actually drop that number in the chat section. That way you guys have it, just in case you have a bad C&P exam, because it happens to the best of us. Even if you're prepared as can be, you've been coming to these coaching sessions, sometimes there's just bad apples and there's nothing you can do about it until you get out of that appointment and call the White House hotline and complain. That's step one after you tell your coach. Tell your coach first. And the next thing you can do is write a memorandum for record.
Put that
And
up again.
what's that?
Put that number up again.
So it's on the chat section. So if you hit that little chat button at the bottom, so it's 855-948-2311.
311.
2311. Yes, sir.
Gotcha.
So definitely want you to call that number and let them know that, hey, I had unjust treatment, and let them know what happened. But they only record so much. They're not verbatim writing down every word that you're saying when you do those calls. So the next best thing is, while it's fresh on your mind, immediately write up a note of what happened, the who, what, when, where of the situation, what was said, what was not said, if it went short, if they had technical difficulties and they were late to your appointment, any and all of those details. So while it's fresh on your mind, write down how that appointment went and then upload that into your claim. So usually try to do that within 24 hours of your appointment. That way it's in the record before they make any decisions on your claim. And you can upload that online at va.gov, or you can mail it in. But of course, snail mail takes a while. So you want to upload that on va.gov so that it's in the record saying, hey, this is how my exam went. And usually they'll get you a new C&P exam pretty quickly after that, because we want, if you had a bad exam, we want it to be reconciled as soon as possible before you get a decision. But say you thought your appointment went well. You had the allotted time, they seemed like they were listening, you said everything that you needed to say, and then you get your decision letter and you're denied. That's happened to me. And you always want to get your exam results whether it's at the VA directly or if it's with the contracted company, you always want to request a copy of those after your appointment, because if you don't have that, you don't know what was said, and you really don't know how it went until you get the report. And I always bring this up. So if you come to my sessions a lot, you've probably heard me say this before. But my first mental health evaluation, I walked in and they said, "Hey, Laura, how are you?" And I said, "Good. How are you?" And they put that in my notes that I said I was good, and it pissed me off, because the whole rest of our meeting could have told you that I was not good, but that's what they put in my notes, because they'll take your words and they'll twist them. So that's why we want you to come to the coaching sessions and learn what to expect and how they kind of try to divert or distract you. So um, our best advice on that is to tell them what's really going on. Don't worry about what's socially acceptable to say. You know, when you go in and they say, hey Bernardo, how are you? Say, I'm not good. I'm really anxious. I haven't slept in a couple days. I'm in a lot of pain, or whatever the case may be. Tell them what's really going on, because that's going to set the tone for your appointment. So that's one thing you can do to advocate for yourself and make sure, try to mitigate these issues before they happen. But say you thought your appointment went really well, you get a decision letter and you're either underrated or you're denied. There's options there too. So again, if you know it kind of didn't go well, but you didn't say anything initially, you can still call the White House hotline and say, "Hey, I didn't have a very good exam. I was going to wait for the results. I've got the results and they left stuff out. Here's my C&P exam report. We talked about this. It's not in here. I don't think she or he was listening to me." Whatever the case may be, it's not too late to complain. Now, the sooner the better, and that's why we have these kind of classes to let you know what your options are. But the sooner the better. But if you thought it went okay, and then you get the results and it wasn't, let the White House hotline still call them, get something on the record for CYA purposes, if nothing else, and then of course, we can appeal it. There's higher level reviews, there's supplemental claims, there's ways to get things back on track and get you a new exam. Usually, if you get that higher level review and you get a new exam, hold on, we see a couple questions coming in. But we've got options. So always let your coach know. Give us a copy of your decision letter, because they'll give you the reason for the decision in there, whether it's you didn't meet the criteria, you didn't have the diagnosis, or whatever the case may be. You want to let your coach take a look at that, because a lot of times we can read between the lines, because the VA is very vague. They're very big on you using the right terminology, but they're very vague when they send decision letters. But we can read between the lines. We know what their verbiage and what they're trying to say. So let your coach review those decision letters, and we'll find a path forward, whether that's a higher level review or a supplemental claim. But we do have options. How do you request the exam from the contractor? The exam results or the appointment? Because if you want to get a new exam, like I said, you can call that White House hotline. Sometimes I've seen them immediately go ahead and request a new exam if it was a really bad exam and you know it went badly. Or how to request your results. So you'll have to put in what's called a FOIA, a Freedom of Information Act. Or sometimes you can call your regional office, and the VSOs are sometimes able to look that up for you. That's something that we are not able to do since we're not VA employees, but a lot of times you can get that directly from the VSO. But let your coach know if you need your exam results, and they'll set you up with how to request that. But it's a longer process. Now, if it was with the VA directly and not with the contracted company, it should be in your Blue Button report within 30 days of your exam. So if you have a My Healthy Vet account, you should be able to get your report that way within 30 days if it was done at the VA. But if it was contracted out to, VES or QTC or LHI, it's a couple more hoops you have to jump through to get those results. But it's always good to jump through those hoops, get your results, and see what they said, so you can fight it. Because if you don't know what was said, you don't know how to rebut it. So it's always important to get a copy of that. That way, you know what's in your records and you can fight what they said or didn't say. Because a lot of people will say, "Hey, I talked about suicidal ideations and they said I denied them." And obviously, they weren't listening, or they they didn't write it down. That's one of the biggest issues that I've seen as not being checked. But that's another reason to come to the coaching sessions, because sometimes if you say, I think about hurting myself, is not specific enough. And again, we all have a tendency to kind of minimize what's going on with us, because that's how we're trained to not talk about our problems. And we all have that tendency. But that's why we want you to be specific. Say, I have thoughts about killing myself, not hurting myself. So you always want to be specific on things like that. That way there's no room for subjectivity for them to twist it and say something else. That's why being direct when they say, hey, how you doing? Don't say good, how are you? Because they don't really care how you're doing. Or I don't really care how they're doing. So I'm not going to say good, how are you? Because I'm there for me. I'm there for my evaluation. This is my appointment. It's not theirs. Make sure you advocate for yourself and tell them what's really going on. Because if you don't say it, they don't write it down, it didn't happen, right? So you got to advocate for yourself. So that's why you guys are all in the right place right now, soaking up this knowledge and making sure you're ready for these appointments so you can try to nip it in the butt before it even becomes a problem. But there's definitely some options. But if you don't have your C file, it's still good to get that done. It does take a long, long time, but that time's going to pass anyway. So you might as well get the process started as soon as you can. Because again, you want to know what's in your records. Because maybe you forgot that you stubbed your toe and now you've got issues with your toe. Maybe you can claim it if you find it in your medical records from in service. So still good to have that. Just again for CYA purposes and things that you thought maybe weren't a big deal when you were in service because you're young and it didn't bother you, but now it is. It's still important to have those records so you have it on paper, because
C
if you
file,
don't request it, what's that?
that's C files. That's your military help records or military records.
Military records in general, yes, sir. And
I
you'll have
requested
to.
it.
You have.
It's been a few months, but I'm still waiting.
It takes a while. It does take a while. So at least you've got the process started. And I do suggest it for everybody. If you don't have your C file, make sure you send in a request. You can do that at the National Archives. And they were closed for a few months because of COVID. So they are backlogged even a little more than normal. So it is taking a little while. But again, the time is going to pass anyways. You might, no time like the present to go ahead and get that request in.
Yeah, I have a question. I
Yeah.
just had a C&P exam last week,
Hmm.
and it was at the VA, and I was all ready for it. You know, lots of notes, went through quite a few classes here, of course. And I get in there, and I thought it was going well, but strangely, as the examiner would go through a certain a portion, like of my stressors or whatever, it's because it was a PTS exam, and he'd be typing away, and then he'd stop and he'd say something to me. Now, this part that you just told me, so that means it's 100% PTSD rating, right? I said, yeah, right. So then he'd type some more. He'd ask a couple basic questions, and then he'd say that again, the same thing. And I'd say maybe 3 times in the exam that occurred. Well, then he got done. It was maybe 45 minutes
Hmm.
of the exam, and he said, "Well, that's all I've got." And there was a lot of stuff that I wanted to say that I hadn't got to say yet. And he said, "Do you have anything else you want to add?" I said, "Absolutely." And so
Good.
I went through my routine and listed basically everything that he missed. And he was typing away like crazy all the time I was talking. But what happens to the poor guy that just sits there and goes, "Well, I don't know. You know, I hope everything I said got in there. I don't know. I just thought it was a little strange that he was asking me if I said it was 100% PTSD. I just wondered if anybody ever heard of that.
So he's probably just saying that that symptom matches the 100% level is probably what he was saying. And a lot of them, they just want to have some kind of relaying what's going on with you. So it sounds like your exam went well. hopefully you'll have a decision soon on that. But again, always request a copy of your C&P exam results. That way you know exactly what he wrote down and what symptoms he did check on your DBQ, because I had the same experience. I thought I had a really good C&P exam, and then I was denied, and I was very frustrated, and that happened twice. And I know we have plenty more webinars this week, so let us know what questions you have, and best of luck on your exams coming up. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I hope to see you next time. But you guys have a good night.
Thank you, Laura. Have a good one.
Thank you. You
Thank you,
too.
Laura.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.